Chapter 1045. At night, the sky was filled with stars. The 80th district of Luhan Street was the most chaotic place in Seoul society. Killing was the main theme here, and the skeletons of all kinds of creatures could be seen everywhere. The surroundings were dead silent, and in the dense forest, there were occasional dark green lights, choosing to devour people. The scene was extremely depressing. No wonder Zaraki was so cruel. To be able to live in such a harsh environment, he must be a monster. Dustless muttered to himself. There were skeletons everywhere around him, and blood dyed the ground red. Some things can't be exposed. Since you want to investigate in secret, as a reward, I'll give you a free flight ticket to the kingdom of heaven. The dormant chakra in Dustless's body immediately surged, and a huge flame spewed out from his mouth. Fire release, grand fire annihilation. The dark sky instantly turned red, and the dense forest in front of him was instantly eradicated. The flashing green lights in the forest also disappeared in an instant. There were only a dozen skeletons on the ground. Are you really Captain Death? How can you be so cruel to your own people? A surprised and doubtful voice came from behind, and there was a sweet fragrance. Dustless turned his head and looked at the girl with grass-green hair, and said indifferently, "Same to you. Looking at your smiling face, you seem to be very happy. Looks like I've gotten what I wanted." The newcomer had green curly hair that was as light and elegant as the waves of the sea. Her watery eyes blinked, and her body was extremely hot and bold. There was a faint smile at the corner of her mouth that could captivate one's soul. Her thin and tender red lips were like millet flowers that could make one's body burn with passion. Even with Dustless's calmness, his pupils were still dazed and sluggish. The girl was wearing white shorts, and her beautiful legs were exposed to the air. They were flawless, like a masterpiece made by the heavens, and people couldn't help but be jealous. Other than that, what made people even more restless was that the green-haired girl was dressed very casually. Her collar was wide open, and her exaggerated breasts were almost exposed in front of Dustless's eyes. This person was the spy Dustless had sent to the Wanless Empire. She could be considered an ally, Catnip. Don't dress like this when you meet me in the future, and don't choose to meet me in the middle of the night. I'm a sleepy person, especially in the middle of the night. Disturbing my sleep is unforgivable. Dustless closed his eyes for a few seconds until his lust was completely extinguished. He then said coldly, "Seoul society is not a good place, especially Luhan Street. Dressing up gorgeously is a big problem." Hearing this, a soul-stirring smile appeared on Candace's perfect face. She purposely widened her collar so that Dustless could see her proud cleavage more clearly. "Don't tell me you've fallen for me." "That's right, I'm born with a natural beauty. I don't even need to make a move during a duel. I just need to throw a few flirtatious glances at my opponent and he'll collapse." Caressing her long hair that cascaded down like a waterfall, Candace laughed foolishly. She was very narcissistic. Hearing this, Dustless looked at her strangely and said with a frown, "Are you an idiot? If I'm really tempted and take forceful measures, do you think you can resist with your strength? And if you really believe that your beauty can change everything, why don't you test it on Jugram?" "Humph. What an insensible man." Candace's proud face instantly darkened. She glared at Dustless fiercely and said with gritted teeth, "Jugram, that bastard. I'll definitely be torn into pieces by him in the future." Dustless responded with silence. His expression was a little blurry, and his eyes were dozing off. "You bastard." Candace was very depressed and could not help but curse in her heart. Dustless had a drowsy look on his face with a beauty in front of him. He did not know how to appreciate her beauty at all. "All right, have you gathered the information I asked for?" Dustless waved his hand and asked impatiently. He continued, "I don't expect you to understand Yawatch's abilities, but at least understand the abilities of the members of the Stern Ritter. Even though he had memories from the third dimension, Dustless only remembered their abilities and did not know their specific moves. There were many heaven-defying people in the Sternritter. Dustless even remembered an unprecedented pervert. As long as he used his brain and imagined his opponent's tragic death, his dream could become reality. He could directly think of his opponent to death. I've tried my best to find out more details, but I didn't manage to get the abilities of Yawach's personal guards and Jugram himself. She handed a file that recorded the moves of the Sternritter to Dustless. Candace said solemnly, Jugram is naturally suspicious. Once he finds out that I'm suspicious, he won't need any so-called evidence. He'll kill me directly. Speaking of which. Dustless nodded. He suddenly thought of Ajuchas, who had invaded Soul Society and had the power to destroy Quincy. He opened his mouth and was about to ask Candace about the details when something unexpected happened. A black irregular crack flashed in the sky. It was different from the black cavity of the Great Void, but it was also similar to a space tunnel. Dustless could clearly hear the crack sound of movement inside. You really know how to pick a time, Dustless frowned. A huge beam of light condensed in his hand. No matter who came out, he would kill them without hesitation. However, Candace's next move stunned Dustless. Chapter 1046. Candace blocked Dustless decisively with a determined look in her eyes. She's my friend, Bambietta Bathabai. I won't allow you to hurt her. Little Bambietta is one of the only friends I have in my life. Candace's eyes shone with determination. Her tone was indomitable and without regret. You value relationships so much. Dustless was surprised. He remembered that there were a few women in the Wandless Empire, but all of them were extremely violent. This Bambietta that Candace mentioned was also very violent. A few seconds later, a pretty girl wearing the same military uniform as Candace appeared in front of him. She wore a military cap with the symbol of the Wandless Empire on it. Her hair reached her waist, and she wore a short skirt with a heart-shaped insignia pinned to her chest. She wore a belt with a heart-shaped insignia, black stockings, and long boots. Perhaps it was the first time she had seen Dustless. Her pure and innocent eyes were somewhat absent-minded and curious. She looked at Dustless with great interest. But when she saw Candace, who was standing next to him, her face instantly became cold, and her whole body emitted a cold aura. Candace, you betrayed His Majesty and fell to the point of associating with the Grim Reaper. Although Bambietta looked like a young girl, she was actually an old monster who was over 100 years old. She was much older than Dustless. As a member of the Sterncross Knights, she was also a wily old fox who had lived for many years. Thus, she immediately saw through the relationship between Dustless and Candace. Is that so? Then what are you going to do with us? Dustless did not deny it. Instead, he asked directly, kill us. Or give us to Jugram to claim credit for. But we're on the same side now. You can't do it with your strength. Compared to the apprehensive Candace, Dustless was undoubtedly much bolder. He was straightforward and did not hide anything. His words were full of provocation and mockery. Boy, you're courting death. Bambietta immediately reacted with the strongest strength. She raised her hand and condensed a crystal divine bow. In an instant, arrows compressed with extremely high spiritual pressure shot out. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The powerful arrow pierced through Dustless, but it didn't have any effect. He stood there unscathed, looking at Bambietta with a mocking gaze, silently mocking her. What's going on? Seeing this, Bambietta's delicate little face was dumbfounded. She had clearly shot Dustless, but he was completely unharmed. He was in high spirits and was completely fine. Brat, don't be so smug. With a ferocious look on her face, Bambietta, who refused to believe it, waved her hand and compressed even more spiritual droplet arrows. She aimed them at Dustless in unison. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Just like before, a few holes appeared in Dustless's body, but they were repaired in the blink of an eye. Smiling, he looked at the red-faced Bambietta and suddenly felt that she was very interesting. He hooked his finger at Bambietta again and said with disdain, "What, is that all? You can't even land a hit on me, and you want to defeat me? Even a 3-year-old wouldn't dream of something as ridiculous as you." "You!" Bambietta was furious when she heard this. Her slender fingers trembled as she pointed at Dustless. She bit her red thin lips and looked rather depressed. "Candace, let's capture him together and then offer him to Jugram. He will definitely forgive your sins." Bambietta, who had no choice, threw an olive branch to Candace, hoping that they could join forces to deal with Dustless. "Little Bambietta, don't be deceived by that hypocrite Jugram. He has been using us from the beginning." Speaking of Jugram, Candace showed an expression of hatred and wanted to tear him into pieces. Seeing this, Bambietta frowned and looked at the grinning Dustless. She pointed at him and said, "Candace, don't be deceived by this shifty-eyed Grim Reaper. One look at him and you can tell that he's not a good person." It didn't matter what she said, but the narrow-minded Dustless's face immediately darkened. "I'm indeed not a good person, but compared to Jugram and Yawach, I suddenly feel like I'm as great as a saint." Dustless snorted at the mention of Yawach and Jugram. "How dare you insult His Majesty?" Bambietta shouted angrily, her eyes spitting fire. Dustless raised his eyebrows and moved closer to Candace, who was having a headache, and said in a low voice, "Your friend has some problems with her head. She only has Yawach in her heart and treats him like a god." In my opinion, Dustless's expression turned cold and murderous as he said, "Why don't we just kill her?" Candace shook her head like a rattledrum and took a deep look at Bambietta. The hesitation in her eyes turned into determination. She decided to pull her best friend out of hell. "Is little Bambietta pretty?" Candace suddenly changed the topic and asked an irrelevant question. Hearing this, both Bambietta and Dustless were stunned. They looked at Candace in confusion. This neurotic woman was making Dustless's brain go blank. "What does this have to do with me? So what if she's pretty?" "She's still an enemy," Dustless said coldly. Candace's face flashed with relief, and then she said mysteriously, "I have a way to pull little Bambietta to our side." Dustless was stunned and said expectantly, "Let's hear it." Candace nodded and said seriously, "Go to archery and rape her. Defile her from head to toe and destroy her body, mind, and will. It's best if you can make her pregnant with your child. This way, little Bambietta will betray us." Dustless's body trembled when he heard that, and he staggered and almost fell on his back. Chapter 1047. Not only was Dustless petrified, but even Bambietta was also stunned. Her face was flushed with shyness, and she looked as attractive as a ripe apple. Her ferocious aura was completely restrained, and she looked quite cute. Finally, she had some unique feminine charm. "I'm deaf, right? Can you repeat what you said just now?" Dustless reiterated. Candace looked at Dustless with a little dissatisfaction. After cursing him for being deaf in her mind, she explained, "Don't be fooled by Bambietta's casual dressing. In fact, she values something as worthless as virginity very much. Don't be fooled by her bold appearance." Candace stared at Dustless with resentment. Dustless opened his mouth, intending to refute, but he was shocked to find that he was speechless. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Candace's dressing was several times more exaggerated than Bambietta's, and she was shamelessly gossiping about others. Dustless suddenly felt that his shamelessness was not proportional to Candace's. Noticing Dustless's strange look, Candace immediately understood that Dustless had misunderstood her. She hurriedly said, "I said virginity is worthless, but it doesn't mean that I don't care. In fact, I'm the same as Bambietta, I'm still a..." Candace, who spoke bluntly, closed her mouth and decisively withdrew the word virgin. Why did she say this to Dustless? All in all, it's not wrong to listen to me. It's best to make her pregnant with your child. In this way, our alliance will have another layer of protection. I'm Bambietta's bosom friend, and will be in-laws in the future. Without waiting for Dustless's reply, Candace murmured to herself, her eyes shining. She felt that she was too smart. She had been worried about how to deepen the alliance with Dustless, but now it seemed that all the problems had been solved. You're also my bosom friend. Dustless couldn't help shaking his head and smiling bitterly in his heart. Shut up, you bastard. I'm going to kill you. Bambietta, who couldn't bear it any longer, roared like an enraged tigress. Her 3,000 willow strands stood erect, and surging killing intent rushed towards Candace and Dustless. Although Candace's method isn't ideal, what she said is true. It wouldn't be bad if we could pull her in. It'd be a good idea to use her as a weapon against another, and we'd be able to catch Wandless Empire off guard from the inside. Ignoring the suffocating murderous aura covering his body, Dustless nodded inwardly. Soon after, a mischievous smile appeared on his face as he pretended to be incomparably vulgar and said, Candace is right. You'd better repent and be saved. Otherwise, I'll... The corner of his mouth twitched. Dustless realized that he couldn't say the word traitor. Otherwise, I will capture you and torture you until you beg for death. I will make you sink into the sea of desire and never be able to rise again. With a wretched and dark smile on his face, Wuchen stared at Bambietta's plump body without any scruples. You too. Hearing this, Bambietta's murderous aura became even more intense. Due to her excessive indignation, the originally invisible murderous aura turned into a cold mist that enveloped Dustless and Candace. This was intolerable. A vast spiritual pressure that was not inferior to that of a captain-level Grim Reaper erupted from her perfect body. Crack, crack, crack. With Bambietta as the center, the ground beneath her feet cracked open, forming a huge crack that rapidly expanded. In the blink of an eye, it had expanded to a radius of several hundred meters. Do you want to die? This is Soul Society. Seeing this, Candace's expression changed drastically. Releasing such a terrifying spiritual pressure would attract the attention of Soul Society sooner or later. When that happened, many captains would definitely rush over. The current Quincy was an existence that couldn't be exposed to the light. So what? As long as I can get rid of you two before they arrive. Bambietta said nonchalantly. Not only did the spiritual pressure she released not decrease, but it also increased, causing Dustless's captain-level Haori to flutter. Ah. There are so many problematic girls these days. Dustless's words immediately attracted Candace and Bambietta's attention, and they both glared at him with dissatisfaction. I'm telling the truth. You two belong to the brainless type. Dustless complained in his heart, and then his expression turned cold. You little things can be killed in the blink of an eye. You're not even worth fighting. Hearing this, Bambietta, who had a bad temper, was about to explode. If Yawatch wanted to kill her, he had to fight, but when it came to Dustless, he didn't even need to fight. One should know when to stop looking down on others. Is that so? Bambietta sneered and said sarcastically, if you can really kill me in the blink of an eye, then I'll agree to your conditions and follow your lead. After saying this, Bambietta looked at Dustless with extreme disdain. Kill her in the blink of an eye. What a joke. Even Yawatch couldn't do this. God is so unfair. Suddenly looking up at the sky, Dustless was dejected. Candace was stunned. Blinking her crystal eyes, she asked, why do you say that? You don't understand. Dustless glanced at Candace and sighed in loneliness. My life is really a tragedy. Now I have another teammate who is as brainless as you. Why is fate so cruel and ruthless? Bambietta vomited blood and trembled with anger. Her ferocious look made it seem as if she wanted to tear Dustless apart. His words undoubtedly meant that he could kill her with a single glance. Chapter 1048. Compared to Bambietta, who snorted disdainfully, Candace remained silent. Although she had only met Dustless twice, including this time, she firmly believed in Dustless's words. It was not surprising that a person who was already a miracle could create any miracle, because his very existence was a miracle. This guy, her eyes flickered, captivating one's soul. Candace, who was lively by nature, remained silent, her expression calm. She sized up Dustless from the corner of her eyes, and a strange feeling spread in her heart. Dustless did not say a word in the face of Bambietta's mockery. It was not that he was powerless to fight back, but that he did not bother to answer. Seeing Dustless remain as indifferent as a statue, Bambietta withdrew her spiritual pressure. After all, this was soul society, and releasing spiritual pressure endlessly would attract the Grim Reaper's attention sooner or later. Bambietta could not help but think. Staring at Dustless and Candace, she frowned. If they fought, she would be the one who would be defeated and captured in the end. A moment later, her eyes lit up, and she suddenly came up with a plan. Since neither of us wants to be caught by the Grim Reaper, why don't we fight in a more interesting way? Bambietta withdrew her flames and put on an elegant smile with a hint of complacency and cunning. Candace remained silent and looked at Dustless. The night is long and I have nothing to do. Tell me what you want to do. I hope you won't break the contract because you can't afford to lose. Dustless glanced at Bambietta indifferently and put his hands back into his sleeves. No wonder you are in cahoots with Candace. You are indeed straightforward. Bambietta looked at Dustless in surprise and had a whole new level of respect for this Grim Reaper. Dustless and Candace clearly had the upper hand in a 2v1 situation, but Dustless was willing to give up the advantage. He was indeed broad-minded. However, the next sentence made Bambietta lose all her good feelings. Just treat it as playing house with a kid who hasn't grown up yet. Hurry up, I still have things to do. Dustless frowned and said impatiently. Brat, you will definitely pay the price. Bambietta clenched her fists and gritted her teeth. Soon after, she sneered, Did you just say that you can kill me in the blink of an eye? Let's use this as a bet. If you can really do it, I'm willing to be your servant. What if I can't do it? Dustless asked curiously while rubbing his chin. Then the two of you will be slaves. Bambietta replied with a cold laugh. This is not fair. Candace stood up and objected. Her beautiful eyes were gloomy. If Wuchen won, Bambietta would become his slave and she would get nothing. On the other hand, if Wuchen lost, she would suffer together with Wuchen. No problem. Dustless raised his eyelids and said indifferently. Hearing this, Candace immediately turned her spearhead and bombarded Dustless indiscriminately, her saliva flying all over the sky. Are you kidding me? You are not qualified to decide my fate. We are allies now, and we don't even have this basic trust. Let's just go our separate ways. Glancing at Candace, Dustless replied, Besides, the winner of this boring competition will definitely be me. Also, I can have a little slave to play with. How great would that be? Dustless stared at Bambietta with an invasive gaze and laughed sinisterly. His wolf-like gaze could ignore the existence of clothes. It was very wretched. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The spirit seed arrow immediately pierced through Dustless, but it was still useless and he recovered in the blink of an eye. Dustless glanced at the frustrated Bambietta with pity and said calmly, This kind of ordinary attack is useless. Only after Annihilator uses perfect holy body, or activates holy word, can he attack my physical body. Until now, Dustless still couldn't figure out how Annihilator could elementalize. Grumble grumble, at this moment, Dustless's stomach started to grumble. He suddenly felt a little hungry and said, "It's getting late. Let's start now and finish this as soon as possible. You can go back and eat." After saying that, Dustless's pupils changed. The demonic and mysterious eternal Mangekyo Sharingan appeared. The berserk eye power made one's soul tremble. If one was stared at by that eye, one's soul would be lost. Grumble, the two girls looked at the mysterious and noble eternal Mangekyo Sharingan in a daze. For some reason, they suddenly felt a sense of insignificance, especially Bambietta. She suddenly felt a little regretful and felt that she had been tricked. "Look into my eyes." This sentence attracted Bambietta's attention. She instinctively looked at Dustless's eyes. The moment their eyes met, Bambietta suddenly felt that the secret in her heart had been seen through. She instinctively wanted to close her eyes. However, it was too late. Tsukuyami. Two simple words came out of Bambietta's dry lips. Bambietta's bright eyes immediately dimmed as if someone had covered her face and robbed her of her ability to think. Plop. Under Candace's horrified gaze, Bambietta fell to the ground weakly. Candace's eyes locked onto Dustless. She was shocked to find that he didn't move at all. He didn't even blink. In his eyes, there was only an insignificant ripple like water. Then, Bambietta was killed instantly. It was as simple as blowing air. Looking at the motionless Bambietta on the ground, Dustless stretched and sighed with emotion. From now on, there is one less beautiful girl in the world, and one more personal maid who is a slave or a servant. Chapter 1049. At this moment, in the world of Tsukuyami, Bambietta, who had just arrived, was complaining incessantly. Dustless didn't torture her, but just threw her into a dead world alone. There was no need to waste too much time. He could just wait for her spirit to collapse on its own. Just imagine how uncomfortable it would be to be thrown into a desolate world alone. In addition, Dustless also showed Bambietta the clip of Busby's sneak attacking Candace. "This way, she should bow down to me." In the real world, Dustless strolled to Bambietta's side, looking at her pale and terrified smiling face, laughing secretly. His tone was like a prank. "It's still too far away. Little Bambietta won't be defeated so easily." Candace shook her head and looked at Dustless in surprise. Especially the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan that attracted her attention. She immediately said with some hunger, "What kind of eye is that? I've never heard of Shinigami having such an ability, or is it the ability of your Zanpakuto?" "This is a dojutsu called Sharingan. In order to get it, I paid a lot." His eyes suddenly became a little melancholy. Dustless's tone had a rare touch of melancholy, as if he was immersed in memories. His soul began to wander, recalling the past. The memories of more than half a century of vicissitudes began to slowly rewind like a movie. Candace looked at Dustless in surprise, standing still. Everyone had a sad past, and no one was an exception. You despicable bastard, I will not let you go." The sudden scolding disturbed the peace. Dustless's confused eyes disappeared, and he returned to his usual calmness. He squatted down and looked at Bambietta, who was sweating profusely. "My cute little maid, why are you so upset? I didn't torture you." Bambietta's pretty face fell when she heard this. Dustless indeed didn't torture her, but being thrown into a desolate world and living alone was worse than being killed. "I have fulfilled my promise, now it's your turn," Dustless said seriously as he looked at Bambietta, whose face had turned green. "Me?" Bambietta's entire face was filled with black lines. Her heart felt weak and she wanted to retreat. She had just said that she would be a slave or a servant, but it was just a casual remark. He didn't have the confidence to admit it. The consequences of little Bandy's violation of the agreement are very serious. Candace stood up and said in a threatening tone, "Although this guy looks decent, he's actually very lecherous. He and the captain of the 4th Division, Uno Hualai, who's also known as the First Sword 8, in the Empire, are involved. Also, he recruited 3 good-looking students. They actually know that Uno Hanaretsu is the First Sword 8. It seems like Wandless Empire knows a lot about Soul Society's internal affairs. Dustless frowned. Wandless Empire was much harder to deal with than Aizen Sosuke. Sosuke Aizen's understanding of the war from 1,000 years ago was similar to Dustless's, if not worse. All information about Quincy had been erased from Soul Society. Aizen's understanding of Quincy was limited to a few words. I'll ask you one last time. Are you willing to surrender or go to hell to accompany Busby? Dustless asked indifferently as he condensed a huge light on his finger and pointed it at Bambietta. You killed Busby, Bambietta said in surprise. She then looked at Dustless's cold face and said with a bitter smile, do I have any other choice now? Also, is the scene you showed me in that strange world real? Dustless nodded and pointed at Candace. If you don't believe me, you can ask the person involved. The image he was referring to was probably the one where Busby's sneak attacked Candace. About an hour later, Bambietta could barely stand up. Her hostility towards Dustless and Candace had lessened a lot. Jugram and Yawach, those 2 despicable B***stards. To think that we trusted them so much. How dare they treat us like dispensable chess pieces? I must have been blind in the past. I must kill them both. After Bambietta understood what had happened, she was filled with righteous indignation. Just like Candace, she wanted to take revenge on Jugram and Yawach. Seeing this, Dustless chuckled. He liked dealing with honest and straightforward people. To put it nicely, they were simple-minded and simple-minded. To put it bluntly, they were brainless. However, Dustless liked brainless people. Dealing with a black-bellied and intelligent woman like Uno Hanaretsu sometimes made him uncomfortable. A smart woman was often annoying. At least, that was what Dustless thought. It was okay to be a little stupid. Oh right, I need to tell you too something important. It has to do with the future of Wandless Empire. As if she remembered something, Bambietta's voice became several times louder. With a serious expression, she revealed a top secret that made Dustless's expression change. The future of Wandless Empire. That is indeed a big piece of news. Wuchen nodded noncommittally, then he teased and guessed, what is it specifically? Jugram wouldn't want to form an alliance with Sosuke Aizen, would he? Hearing this, Bambietta's eyeballs almost fell out. She said in disbelief, you must be a Quincy. Jugram wants to form an alliance with Sosuke Aizen. Chapter 1050. Dustless opened his mouth. Although he was surprised, he still shook his head. Jugram's risky move was within Dustless's expectations. Quincy's goal was naturally to destroy Shinigami and kill Soul King. Aizen's goal was the same. Even if the 2 sides hit it off, it would still be in line with each other's goals. After all, Shinigami was their enemy. But I don't think Aizen will cooperate with Jugram. After a while, Dustless confirmed. Although it was just his personal guess, he was very certain. Indeed, Wandless Empire's internal affairs say that Aizen is an ambitious man who wants to become a god. The chances of him lowering himself and submitting to Quincy are 0. Candice chimed in. Dustless looked at the 2 and asked curiously, then what's your empire's evaluation of me? No matter how bad I am, I'm still better than my predecessor, East Sendai, right? Hearing this, Candace and Bambietta looked at each other with a hint of ridicule in their eyes. It can't be that he's not even as good as that kid from East Deity Palace, right? Wuchen covered his old face in disappointment, as if he was speechless. That's not it. The 2 women shook their heads at the same time. Bambietta said, Jugram recently created a special fighting force, and you're one of them. Wu Chen was stunned when he heard that and asked subconsciously, special combat power? You didn't remember wrong, did you? There were indeed special existences like special combat powers, but they would only appear after Yawatch fully recovered and attacked Soul Society. Right, no matter what, you have to be careful. Jugram isn't a good person. Bambietta frowned and reminded him with good intentions. You. Dustless showed a dissatisfied expression and scolded with a straight face, I won the competition just now. Didn't I say that you're not allowed to talk about you? You have to call me young master. Bambietta's delicate face was full of confusion. She couldn't even call Dustless Lord. She had to call him young master. This seemingly trivial matter was very important to Dustless. He was even narrow-minded and couldn't be changed. Speaking of which, thinking of the great void ajuchas that invaded Hueco Mundo, Dustless asked, Soul Society invaded a great void with the ability to kill Quincy, you killed it? The two asked in unison with nervousness. Dustless nodded. The Mantis Great Void was indeed killed by him, cut into pieces by Hado 90. That's bad. The memories and soul of the Great Void you killed will all fall into Yawatch's hands in the end, Bambietta said solemnly. This meant that Yawatch would know the moves and characteristics of Wuchen when he woke up in the future. No. You're mistaken about one thing. Seeing that the two of them had misunderstood, Dustless immediately corrected them. I don't care about that. I don't even know how many abilities and moves I have. What I care about is that since voids can obtain the ability to kill Quincy, the Grim Reaper should be able to do the same. Looking at Candace and Bambietta expectantly, Dustless's face was full of hope. If possible, he very much wanted to seize Yawatch's ability. Theoretically, it should be possible, but we don't know the specifics. The abilities of the Sternritter Regiment are all given by Yawatch. Candace instantly understood Dustless's intention. He was probably aiming for Yawatch's abnormal ability. But, I advise you. Young master, you should stop dreaming. Seeing Dustless staring at her gloomily, Bambietta's expression stiffened. She quickly changed her words and said unwillingly, although I don't know how strong Yawatch is, those who have seen how terrifying he is are all afraid of him. Bambietta said in a trembling voice. Her tone was also full of fear and dread because the name Yawatch was, to some extent, a god. Forget it. Go back. If you come out late, Jugram, who is naturally suspicious, will inevitably be suspicious. With a heartwarming smile, Dustless ordered them to leave. This guy is not bad. Bambietta secretly glanced at Dustless and muttered in her heart. Although Dustless sometimes looked sloppy and had a cynical attitude toward everything, she could feel that Dustless was not a cold-blooded person like Jugram. Especially when she was quite close to Dustless just now, Bambietta felt that he was warm. At least, he had body temperature. The night sky of Soul Society was full of stars, and the scenery was very charming. As night fell, Dustless walked alone to the 7th Division. He thought that when he returned to the division, he would be greeted with good wine and delicious food. Who would have thought that the entire captain's office was filled with the strong smell of alcohol, and the pungent smell made people retreat. A soldier's drunken, a general's drunken. This saying is true. Opening the door of the captain's office, Dustless stepped in. The first thing he saw was Hinamori, Rukia, and Matsumoto Ranjaku. They were all drunk and completely unconscious. Forget it. I'm in a good mood today. I'll let you go. Picking up the blanket on the sofa and covering them, Dustless turned around and left. Tiredness spread all over his body, and he had to find a suitable place to rest. However, God often likes to play tricks on people. Sometimes, the more tired you are and the more you want to sleep, the more troublesome it is. Chapter 1051. In the dark, a young man's silhouette could be clearly seen. He was thin and had silver hair. A cold wind blew, making his captain's haori dance in the wind. The word 6 could be clearly seen. Captain Ikamaru Jin, why are you here so late at night? Dustless pretended to be surprised. In fact, he knew that Ikamaru Jin would come looking for Matsumoto Renanju because Matsumoto Jin's childhood sweetheart was Renanju. At this moment, Ikamaru Jin's expression wasn't as sly as before. But his mouth was still raised, and his eyes were narrowed. His smile wasn't as playful as before. Instead, it was like a hunter sizing up his prey. But now, Ikamaru Jin was smiling coldly. Dustless took Matsumoto Renanju behind his back. It wasn't hard to guess what Ikamaru Jin was thinking. I also have nothing to do. During this period, I heard that Captain Wuchin found a few talented female students, so I wanted to pay my respects to them in advance. Ikamaru Jin said calmly. There's a problem. Dustless raised his eyebrows. He immediately noticed Ikamaru Jin's strange behavior. Although he hadn't offended Aizen, both sides were secretly fighting each other. Sorry, Captain Ikamaru Jin might be disappointed. They are already asleep. Dustless directly refused. Dustless felt that Ikamaru Jin wasn't that simple. Since he pulled Matsumoto Renanju and the others into the 7th division, he wouldn't let them be in danger. This cunning fox only had Matsumoto Renanju in his heart. He was cold to everyone else. It's just a meeting. Captain Dustless, you don't have to be so cold. Ikamaru Jin touched his chin and smiled. He was also very calm. Dustless clearly felt that the surroundings were extremely cold. The humidity was affected by Ikamaru Jin's murderous aura, and there were signs of it freezing. Cold and heartless. Dustless repeated Ikamaru Jin's words. He said coldly, Captain Ikamaru Jin, what do you think will happen if you put a sinister snake in a sheep pen? Of course, Ikamaru Jin didn't even think about it. He stared at the faint smile on Dustless's face and realized that Dustless was implying something. That sinister snake was obviously cursing him. I didn't expect Captain Dustless to be so good at talking. Ikamaru Jin's expression changed a little bit. Then he opened his eyes and looked at the 7th Division's captain's office. Then he turned around and left. So quick. That's impossible. How could he leave without seeing Matsumoto Renanju? Looking at Jin's back, Dustless pondered over his motive. So Matsumoto Jin. Of course, Matsumoto Renanju Matsumoto be Matsumoto be Matsumoto Matsumoto be Matsumoto eyes and Jin, sharp isisicically looking at him. Staring. Was, isisicic. Jin was sharp, Jin looking. Looking up, he saw a huge white light coming at him. Of course, there was also the sound of a fatal attack. Shoot him, Shinigami. The cold light flashed rapidly. Because it was too sharp, people didn't dare to open their eyes. It extended without limit and almost pierced through Wu Qin in the blink of an eye. That's all you got. Ikamaru Jin said to himself as he put away his zanpakuto. Just like being melted by the divine spear, Dustless's entire person vanished without a trace. You're right, I heard that your zanpakuto is very strong, but it seems that it's all you got. Thousands of fireflies swept across the pitch-black sky. In a flash, it was as bright as day. Gathering behind Ikamaru Jin, Dustless, who had a cold expression, mercilessly sent out a small foot covered in light. Light speed kick. Kakaka. The wall 100 meters away cracked, and Ikamaru Jin was stuck in it. However, this kind of normal attack couldn't do any damage to him. He was almost unharmed. No wonder Aizen let Jin stay by his side even though he knew that he was up to no good. I thought he was just a passerby. Now it seems that I was wrong. As soon as he said that, another powerful attack came. Since it was Ikamaru Jin who attacked first, Dustless didn't hold back. Bansho Tensei. He raised his hand, and an endless gravitational force covered Ikamaru Jin's body. He started to float uncontrollably. You took the initiative to close the distance with me. Stupid. Do you know what ability my Zanpakuto has? Sensing the gravitational force covering his body, Ikamaru Jin's smile got bigger. He didn't resist. Instead, he rushed at him at an even faster speed. In the blink of an eye, the Zanpakuto fell from the sky. You're the stupid one, Captain Ikamaru Jin. Staring at the falling cold light without changing his expression, Wuchen opened his hands, and a repulsive force that was diametrically opposite to gravity erupted. Shinra Tensei. Just as Dustless was about to be cut in half, the repulsive force came out of nowhere. Ikamaru Jin's smile froze, and an unstoppable force forced him back. Caught off guard, Ikamaru Jin was sent flying again. I just stole your childhood friend. I just pulled Matsumoto Renankaya into the 7th division. I'm not even marrying her. Why are you so agitated? Even though Ikamaru Jin covered it up perfectly, Dustless could still see what he was really thinking. His childhood friend was stolen by Dustless. He was heartbroken. Chapter 1052. Dustless scolded Jin for being so narrow-minded. I just stole your childhood sweetheart. I didn't kill your parents. Why are you acting like you hate me so much? Leave if you know what's good for you. I can treat it as if nothing happened. There won't be anyone gossiping at the head captain's place. Wuchen assured. Jin stood up, his eyes didn't waver, obviously he didn't care about Dustless's words. This kid is willing to do anything for Matsumoto Ranjaku. I remember that he was lurking around Sosuke Aizen to avenge Matsumoto Ranjaku. Dustless said with a hint of admiration. Leave. I'm not the kind of person who knows what's good for him. Ikamaru Jin refused without hesitation as he raised his Zanpakuto. Wiping the blood from his mouth, Jin said, beating up a captain, it's not a small matter to the head captain. To the head captain. Captain Jin, don't you think you're ridiculous? The head captain doesn't have time to deal with this kind of trivial matter. Dustless couldn't help but despise him. When he was about to pounce on Jin, a black shadow blocked his way. His face was very gentle, he had a smile on his face, he was wearing glasses, he looked like a gentleman, and his body exuded a strong scholarly aura. The first impression he gave was that he was elegant, calm. Captain Aizen. What do you want? Dustless glanced at Sosuke Aizen and asked indifferently. In the Godai 13, Dustless hated him the most, and no one would be able to accept this person who was everywhere and thought himself to be the smartest. Two captains dueling at night, this is not in accordance with the rules of Soul Society. Sosuke Aizen touched his eyes and smiled gently. If Dustless didn't know about his dark history, he might have been fooled. Captain Aizen, you should say this to Captain Jin. Pointing at Ikamaru Silver who was holding a dagger in his hand, Wuchen acted as if it was none of his business. Captain Dustless, you're treating me like an outsider. I just want to meet the members of the 7th division. Why do you have to stop me? Ikamaru Jin regained his sly smile. His smile was extremely annoying. Sorry, they don't want to see you. After that, Dustless entered the team house without turning around. As for Jin and Sosuke Aizen, he directly ignored them, treating them as air. Waxy Aizen Sosuke raised his head and gave Ikamaru Jin a cryptic look. Ikamaru Jin nodded and attacked. You don't know what's good for you. I don't want to take you seriously. Noticing the dark shadow behind him, Dustless's killing intent rose. An absurd idea suddenly popped up in his mind. He couldn't wait to go back and ravage Matsumoto Ranjaku in various ways. When did I become like this? Dustless shook his head and tried to wake himself up. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At the same time, Jin was closing in on Dustless. He was about to chop off Dustless's head. Clang clang clang. Chapter 1053. Dustless stared at Aizen, or rather, his Sanpakuto. In Soul Society, the person that Aizen was most worried about was undoubtedly Dustless. Strength was one thing, but the bigger reason was that Dustless hadn't seen the release of Kyoka Suigetsu. On a whim, Aizen teamed up with Ikamaru Jin to test this conspiracy. Idiot, I'll say goodbye from now on. Seeing Dustless staring at his Sanpakuto curiously, Aizen smiled. Although the captains of Soul Society were all colleagues, in a sense, they were also competitors. Everyone wanted to know each other's Sanpakuto and their abilities. Humph. Idiot, do you think your Kyoka Suigetsu ability is invincible? He's as innocent as a kid. On the surface, he looked like a curious baby, but in his heart, Wu-chin sneered. In this world, the only thing that could make Dustless wary was Yawatch's heaven-defying ability. Although the catoptric deflection was powerful and heaven-defying enough, it had little effect on Dustless. It didn't even have any effect, as long as he closed his eyes and used Kanbunchaku Haki. In this world, only absolute strength could be relied on. After a while, Sosuke Aizen released his Sanpakuto and Jin Ikamaru stopped fighting and left without saying a word, not even bothering to explain. Perhaps in Sosuke Aizen's eyes, anyone who saw Kyoka Suigetsu's Shirkai was no longer qualified to be his opponent. They were nothing more than pawns. Captain Aizen, Urahara Kasuke's half-Hogyoku, shouldn't we take the opportunity to snatch it? Ikamaru Jin took a deep look at the 7th Division's house, as if he was looking for Matsumoto Ranjaku. He turned to Aizen and asked. There's no need to draw legs on a snake, he's already immersed in Kyoka Suigetsu, and don't you think it's a good thing that Hogyoku is in his hands? Sosuke Aizen analyzed wisely, it would be best if he can create Hogyoku, then we can take advantage of the situation. Aizen smirked. Even if he can't create a perfect Hogyoku, he'll lose his value. Although it wasn't explicitly stated, the meaning was self-evident. A person who had lost his value could only die in the end. But he's very strong, unimaginably strong. According to the news from Hueco Mundo, even Vastolord couldn't withstand a single blow from him. Ikamaru Jin reminded. He had heard of Dustless sweeping through Hueco Mundo. At that time, Squad Zero had also been tricked by Dustless. There's no doubt that the man is very strong. If it's a one-on-one fight, I'm not his opponent. I'm afraid the only one in Soul Society who can suppress him is the head captain. Aizen didn't want to give up, but at the same time, he admired Dustless. Dustless had only been a Shinigami for a year, but he had achieved more than he had in hundreds of years. But have you forgotten that the biggest advantage of my mirror's image is not to confuse the enemy? Aizen said proudly and confidently. If a one-on-one fight doesn't work, then I'll use mirror's image to command the power of the entire Soul Society to deal with that man. Although he trusted the ability of mirror's image very much, Aizen liked to be prepared for everything. His success today has a lot to do with his meticulous mind. Who told the idiots of Godii 13 to listen to the orders of Central 46? It's a pity that such a good chess piece didn't squeeze out the last bit of its value. Don't you think so, Jin? Yes, Captain Aizen. Idiot. Looking at the disappearing backs of Ikamaru Jin and Aizen, Dustless sneered. Aizen's mirror's image can hypnotize the 5 senses, but the observation haki is outside the 5 senses. The chance of Aizen defeating him with this ability is 0. Even the conversation between Aizen and Ikamaru Jin was heard clearly by Dustless. What a blatant plan. He should be waking up soon. Looking down at the blue round bead in his hand, Dustless muttered to himself. The mysterious black and purple light contained a magical power, penetrating a faint purple mist. If you perceive it carefully, you will be surprised to find that it's a very dense materialized Ryatsu. The bead in his hand is the Hogyoku. Aizen. You don't deserve to have the Hogyoku. It would be impolite for me to accept it on your behalf. Feeling the cool touch of the Hogyoku, Dustless raised the corner of his mouth. His face was full of satisfaction, and of course, a touch of disappointment. Getting the Hogyoku is indeed something to be happy about, but so far, Dustless's Zanpakuto hasn't moved at all. As a Shinigami, Dustless is embarrassed that he doesn't have a Zanpakuto. Zaraki Kenpachi is stronger than him, and he has a Zanpakuto. Now, Dustless can only use the first Hogyoku. Forget it. Since Aizen used the ability of mirror's image on me, it means that Aizen should be doing something in the near future. After thinking about it, Dustless felt relieved. He can't force the Zanpakuto, and he can't force it. What's more, according to Dustless's current strength, obtaining the Hogyoku is like adding wings to a tiger, and the Zanpakuto is actually dispensable. Chapter 1054. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, 5 months had passed. Perhaps because of the different concept of time of death, these 5 months, Dustless only felt like a snap of the fingers, slipped away without any consciousness. During this period, the Hogyoku also completely awakened. Why don't I feel anything? Dustless was puzzled, looking at the smooth chest. In the center, there was obviously a mysterious blue bead inlaid. A day ago, Dustless had implanted the Hogyoku into his body. But to his disappointment, there was not even a fart reaction, let alone evolution. Definitely no feeling. When your Ryatsu bottoms out, I will provide you with power. When your life is oppressed, when you fear death, you can evolve. The surface of the Hogyoku flashed a mysterious halo. At this moment, a strange voice suddenly invaded Dustless's mind. Are you the consciousness of the Hogyoku? Hearing this, Dustless was not surprised. The Hogyoku did have its own consciousness, but to his surprise, this clear voice was no different from a 15 or 16-year-old girl, very clear and pleasant. Only by fear of death can I evolve. Dustless frowned. He may not be able to evolve in this life. There seems to be no one in this world who can make him feel fear. Yes, only when the host is afraid of death, and wants to get stronger, can you evolve. The consciousness of the Hogyoku confirmed. Only by fear can I evolve. This requirement is too difficult. Dustless couldn't help but feel a headache. He can only pin his hope on Habak, hoping that he can bring him fear. But it doesn't matter, it's also very good to get unlimited Ryatsu. Dustless showed a smile and immediately said loudly, Wanju, quickly bring my captain's Haori, I'm going to be late for the captain's meeting. That old man is really bored, he always wants to hold a meeting. Thinking of old man Yamamoto, Dustless couldn't help but complain. The 7th Division needs to increase the members, at least a few nannies to wait on you. Matsumoto Ranjaku shouted in dissatisfaction. She threw Captain Haori to Dustless and immediately fell onto Dustless's bed. Gulp. Dustless awkwardly took a deep breath and looked at Matsumoto Ranju's voluptuous body. Matsumoto Ranjaku was only wearing simple pajamas, which couldn't hide her hot body at all. Moreover, Soul Society's clothes were very strange, everything seemed to be transparent. Get up. Dustless nudged Matsumoto Ranjaku, but she obviously didn't buy it and fell asleep. Her body was filled with the smell of alcohol. Apparently, she drank again last night. Seeing this scene, Dustless was particularly depressed. Hinamori and Rukia were really good, doing things in an orderly manner. Matsumoto Ranjaku, on the other hand, was nothing but a drunkard. Dustless, however, was that this guy actually wanted him to pay for the drinks. A black butterfly suddenly stopped beside the ship and attracted Dustless's attention. Hell butterfly. Frowning, Dustless quickly put on his clothes and rushed to the 1st Division. In the 1st Division's building, the captains were gathered, and the atmosphere was tense. Captain Nya, give this old man an explanation. The angry rebuke exploded, and everyone looked at the miserable Nya Maori. Because of Aizen's Hogyoku, the souls of the Shinigami kept disappearing in Rukuen Street, and the number of students in the academy decreased greatly. Yamamoto began to blame Mayuri. As the captain of the 12th Division, he was responsible for monitoring Soul Society's every move. Naturally, he blamed Mayuri for the inexplicable disappearance of the souls. It's hard to guard against a thief in the family. This old man is unlucky. With Aizen Sosuke helping him, he won't be able to find out who did it. Looking at Mayuri with pity, Dustless looked at Aizen. There was no need to guess who did it, only one person would do it, Aizen Sosuke. Mayuri's face turned black. He wanted to quibble, but he didn't dare to say more. He didn't know who did it, and the head captain would kill him if he spoke nonsense. In desperation, he took out a bunch of useful information, hoping that the head captain would calm down. It seems to be this guy. Mayuri handed the photos to the captains and said with a headache, I don't know what kind of monster this guy is, but he doesn't look like a Shinigami, and he doesn't look like a hollow. Anyway, his strength is boundless. I sent people to investigate in secret, but they were all killed by this guy. It turned out to be him. His pupils shrank. Witnessing the voice of the mysterious monster in the photo, Wu Chen's bored eyes flashed a bright light, and his expression was also very surprised. No wonder Mayuri's people were killed. This monster is really strong. Dustless showed an interested expression. He thought that Aizen would need a few years to create the monster in the photos, but now it's out of the blue. The monster in the picture could be called a greater void, but its void hole was blocked, and it was wearing a mask. There were 2 bone horns on its forehead, which were extremely sharp. Its entire body was pitch black, and it looked very mysterious. Chapter 1055. Dustless was speechless. The captains discussed among themselves. This was the first time they saw such a strange creature. What is this? After a while, the head captain muttered in confusion. His eyes were filled with curiosity as he looked at Mayuri. This was his specialty. However, the head captain was going to be disappointed this time. Mayuri shrugged helplessly with a blank expression. This was the first time he had seen such a strange thing. I remember this void is called Void White. It's a void created from the soul of a Shinigami. It's very strong. I think it's on the same level as Vastolord, maybe even stronger. Compared to the captains who didn't know, Dustless was familiar with it. It was the void created by the future Shinozaki Ichigo. Captain Sama, Aizen stood up and politely said, no matter what this guy is, he only went to 3 places, Soul Society, Hueco Mundo, and the modern world. Aside from that, there are no other places. Dustless sneered and immediately attacked Aizen. Captain Aizen, you want to send a Shinigami to the modern world and Hueco Mundo, but we don't have that many people. Ha! Aizen smiled calmly and said, of course, I'm not going there to wait. That stupid method won't work. What I mean is, since this monster likes to hunt souls, we should take the initiative to lure it. We don't even know its location, how can we lure it? Dustless sneered. He felt Aizen's motives weren't pure. It's simple. Didn't Captain Ye say that the monster likes to eat souls? That means it likes people with high Ryatsu. Aizen smiled and said confidently, I think it's most likely to go to Luhan Street or the modern world. It shouldn't have the ability to enter Hueco Mundo. Dustless glanced at Aizen and then looked away. Dustless was sure that Aizen didn't have good intentions because Sosuke Aizen was the one who created Void. Now that he was released for no reason, there must be a conspiracy. Leave Soul Society's drifting Soul Street to me. I will tear that bastard apart and return peace to drifting Soul Street. A rough voice came. Looking up, it was the hungry Zaraki Kenpachi, waving his Sanpakuto excitedly as if he was on steroids. This brat has also learned this trick. Public morals are really degenerating these days. Dustless couldn't help but feel helpless. Even Zaraki, who loved to fight, was talking about peace. Among all the captains, he was the one who was most eager for something big to happen. Raising his eyebrows, a captain who rarely spoke suddenly stood up, "Then the modern world leave the modern realm to me." Dustless glanced at the person and immediately stepped forward to answer. Everyone's eyes focused on Dustless and immediately looked at the captain who just spoke. This person was the current captain of the 10th Division, Isshin Shiba. Dustless recognized this person. He was the father of the future Shinozaki Ichigo. In the future, he would be in cahoots with Urahara Kasuke and the others. Then Captain Dustless will go to the modern realm. Yamamoto nodded and said, "That's not good. I heard that there are a lot of Quincy in the modern realm. Why don't you come with us? It would be best if you can catch some for me to experiment on." Mayuri laughed sinisterly as he waved his slender fingernails that were comparable to blades. "Quincy." Yamamoto's cloudy eyes emitted a chill and immediately said coldly, "Although the chance of being attacked by Quincy is 0, it's good to go to the modern realm together. At least we can take care of each other." Dustless heard this and stared at Yamamoto. Maybe other people thought that Quincy was finished, but the captain knew very well. Quincy wasn't completely finished. 1,000 years ago, he didn't kill Yawatch, he only sealed it. But why is Sosuke Aizen so confident? Isn't he afraid that I will kill Void White? Dustless frowned deeply. He was sure that Aizen spent a lot of money to create Void White. He was a greater Void White that was comparable to Vastolord. He was the accumulation of countless souls. It would be a loss if he was killed. After all, he spent a lot of effort to create Void White. And that Isshin Shiba, his eyes turned and fell on the usually low-key Isshin Shiba. In Dustless's impression, the number of times he spoke could be counted on one hand. But now, he chose to take the initiative to attack. It was the opposite of his usual low-key self. "Forget it, let's talk about it in the modern realm." Dustless didn't bother with the things he didn't understand. He just needed to deal with them as they came. There was no need to do anything superfluous. In front of absolute strength, all schemes and tricks were useless. This was the basis of Dustless's confidence. Aizen's schemes wouldn't have any substantial effect. They would only humiliate themselves and become a joke. Even Isshin Shiba was the same. If he had any ulterior motives, he could just kill him as soon as possible. After all, they were in the modern realm. He could push the blame to Hueco Mundo. After about half an hour, the captain's meeting ended. Tomorrow, Dustless and Isshin Shiba would leave Soul Society and go to the modern realm. Chapter 1056. In the sky above Kangzucho, the void was distorted. Two figures floated in the air, looking down at the crowded city below. Although I'm not used to it, I've been in Soul Society all year round. Changing to the modern world all of a sudden, it's quite exquisite. Shiba Isshin looked at the metropolis on the ground and said with emotion. He looked at the cars driving below and looked at them curiously. Soul Society has never had such a thing. Captain Isshin, is this your first time in the modern world? Looking at the childlike Isshin, Dustless asked. Isshin nodded and immediately suggested, "Kangzucho is quite big, why don't we split up to find that guy, it's faster." Dustless nodded and agreed, "Then I'll go to the east. Then I'll go to the west." Isshin jumped quickly on the high-rise buildings, his steps light and vigorous. He obviously wasn't running around aimlessly, but with a mysterious map in his hand, looking left and right to find his destination. This kid's motives are really impure, his direction seems to be, in a hidden alley. Dustless stared at Isshin in the distance with a cold smile. He had already vaguely guessed where Isshin was looking for. No wonder Urahara Kasuke was kicked out of Soul Society and knew so much inside information. I really didn't know that this kid was a spy. After thinking for a while, Dustless followed, his killing intent thickening. If Ishin knew that Dustless had embezzled the Hogyoku, he would definitely report it to the head captain. Oh whoa! At this time, a hysterical roar mixed with destructive spiritual pressure shook the sky, and the glass on both sides of the street was shattered by the powerful spiritual pressure. This spiritual pressure is not right. The footsteps suddenly sounded. Dustless frowned, keenly aware of the different spiritual pressure between Shinigami and Hollow. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. A black shadow cut through the sky, surrounded by flames. It was Ishin. Let's go and see what you can do. With a thought, Dustless followed. In short, he planned to destroy Ishin, or at least banish him forever. Just like Urahara Kasuke. Void White doesn't seem to be an opponent of Ishin Shiba. Suddenly remembering Void White's strength, Dustless couldn't help but worry. Although Void's strength was comparable to Vastolord, he was still killed by Ishin in the end. This time, I'll reluctantly help Aizen Sosuke and use Haku's hand to kill Ishin. In the alley, staring at the figure in front of him, Dustless's chakra began to surge as he focused on Ishin Shiba. Tao Breaker 90, Black Coffin. Several black shadowless blades came from all directions and almost instantly approached Ishin Shiba, who didn't know what was going on. Ishin was shocked when he saw this. Sensing the sharp auras coming from all directions, he shouted without thinking. Binding down number 73, Mountain Toppling Crystal. A transparent triangular defensive formation instantly appeared and protected Ishin. Even though he managed to counterattack immediately, the Tao Breaker 90's attack was still difficult to block. After a brief stalemate, the Black Coffin's attack tore through his defenses. Puchi! 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 Shiba Ishin's body was instantly torn open, and blood was dripping from his wounds. It was such a shocking wound that people couldn't bear to look at it. Who did this? Come out for me. Enduring the unprecedented pain, Ishin unleashed his violent Ryatsu, destroying all the buildings within a radius of 100 meters, turning it into a plain visible at a glance. Even with such a heavy injury, he's still alive and kicking. His strength is probably beyond the captain level. But if you encounter Void White, you should be dead for sure. Dustless, who had already escaped, chuckled and used the Tensigan's power to clearly capture Ishin's roar, and his Ryatsu also began to rampage. Ishin's reckless release of Ryatsu will only attract Void White's attention. That's a student. When Dustless was about to watch a good show, an unexpected figure appeared in front of him. The newcomer was obviously a girl, with golden curly hair that fell to her waist like a waterfall. Her facial features were exquisite, as if they were the work of the gods. Her skin was as delicate as snow in winter. Her watery eyes were very lively, and there were obvious sweat stains on her face. What caught Dustless's attention the most was that she was holding a crystal bow in her hand. It's actually a Quincy. And what's with that face? It feels like déjà vu, strange. Dustless scratched his head. He only knew two female Quincy, one was Bambiita, and the other was Candace, but he obviously didn't know this beautiful Quincy, but he had a vague impression of her in his mind. Could it be her? After a while, a name that matched the identity of the girl Quincy appeared in his mind, Shinozaki Mikoto. Shinozaki Mikoto has the strength to fight against the captain, and she will definitely disrupt my plan if she helps Ishin. After pondering for a moment, Dustless rushed over again. Of course, it was not to help Ishin. If Void White can't kill Ishin, then Dustless will do it himself. Chapter 1057. With just a thought, the things at the end of the world were also close at hand. Under the abnormal eye power of the Tensigan, everything was right in front of him. He actually forgot about the hatred between Shinigami and Quincy. This Quincy is really compassionate. Dustless secretly observed the situation. This kind of thing has nothing to do with him, so there's no need to meddle in other people's business. He just needs to find an opportunity to kill Ishin. Roar, the violent roar came again, accompanied by violent wind and waves. The central area was like an earthquake, and the ground was shaking and cracking, and the cracks were spreading rapidly. 1 meter, 10 meters, 50 meters, 100 meters. The cracks were getting bigger and bigger, and the exaggerated range was about to annihilate the whole world. The shaking gradually became farther and farther away, and the power did not weaken, but became stronger. Under Dustless's interested gaze, a monster with a knife, a mask, and a horn on its head was exposed under the sunlight. The most surprising thing was that this monster had a void hole, but it was blocked by a mysterious substance. Finally willing to come out. But its strength is really strong, can the two of them deal with it together? Dustless had a big question mark in his heart. There was no doubt that the power of void, the great void in Shinozaki Ichigo's body, was beyond doubt. After erupting, it killed Vasto Lord Ulquiorra with overwhelming strength. Its strength was self-evident, especially when Isshin was seriously injured by Dustless. Overall, the situation was dangerous. Are you okay? Looking at Isshin's horrifying wound, Shinozaki Mikoto rushed over and asked with concern. Her tone was as warm as the winter sun. No, I'm fine, I won't die for the time being. Isshin said firmly, but his trembling body betrayed him, and his forehead was full of sweat. Seeing this, the kind-hearted Kurosaki frowned and quickly took out her handkerchief. Just as she was about to wipe the sweat off Isshin's forehead, a huge flash of light swooped down and interrupted her action. It's Void Flash, get out of the way. Isshin shouted loudly, and immediately stood up. His body was releasing Ryatsu, but the crack on his wound was getting bigger and bigger, and blood kept flowing. The one who should get out of the way is you. Shinozaki Mikoto resolutely stood beside Isshin, and many arrows were condensed from her fingers, aiming at the incoming flash. This little girl, Dustless, who was in the dark, looked at Shinozaki Mikoto with shining eyes. From the fluctuations of Ryatsu and the skillful movements of the Quincy, she was definitely not weaker than Bambieta and Candace. By Shinozaki Mikoto. Whoosh! A few divine arrows that were compressed by the spiritual particles were shot out. They rose from the ground and came into close contact with the falling flash. Boom! At the moment when the light beam fell, Wu Chen's right arm swept out, and the world that could destroy was easily shattered. The sky cleared up again. Chapter 1059. Ishida Ryuzo was shocked. He felt the aura of death that he had never felt before. The high-density light did not even touch him, but he felt like he was going to melt like water. Ishida Ryuzo was sure that if he were to take Dustless's attack in his current state, he would definitely die. Don't touch him, he's one of us. Shinozaki Mako's beautiful eyes widened with anxiety. Although she was disgusted by the marriage arranged by the Ishida family, she couldn't just watch Ishida Ryuzo get killed. After all, she owed the Ishida family a debt of gratitude. One of us. Dustless turned to look at Shinozaki and sneered. He took the initiative to attack me with the Holy Annihilation Arrow. One of us attacking one of us. That's rare. Shinozaki Jinko was stunned when he heard this. He lowered his head silently in surprise. He knows the skill of Quincy. This time, it was Shinozaki's turn to be shocked. She looked at the shining leg that was approaching Ishida Ryuzo and quickly said, "That's a misunderstanding, he's fine." Naive, Dustless glanced at Shinozaki indifferently and said, "Before coming to the modern world, the head captain said that if you encounter a Quincy sneak attack, there is no need to show mercy. Kill without mercy. This kid is the one who started it. Do you think I need to show mercy?" Shinozaki, even if you don't understand the grudge between the Shinigami and Quincy, you should have heard of it. Isshin nodded. First of all, Shinigami and Quincy were hostile forces. Although he felt sorry for Shinozaki Makino, Ishida Ryuzu was the one who attacked first. He deserved to be killed. His hands were in Ishida Ryuzu's hands. No one forced him to do it. But Shinozaki's expression froze. She moved her lips but closed them again. She looked very helpless. "You're going to suffer if you're so kind." Dustless's voice was unusually light. In short, there was more vitality in it. He said, "Besides, do you think this arrogant kid will appreciate it?" The answer is no. Not only will he not, but he will also feel humiliated. For a man to be protected by a woman, this may be worse than killing him. Dustless's words were as sharp as a knife, piercing Ishida Ryuzu's self-esteem. His face, which could be considered handsome, suddenly became extremely distorted. "I hate people like you the most. Others saved you, but you don't appreciate it. You even put on an expression of, 'I'm very capable and don't need you to meddle in other people's business.' Actually, you're just a piece of trash." With a cold expression, Dustless's right leg landed on Ishida Ryuzu's face. Boom, boom, boom. A violent explosion resounded through the sky, and a wave of destructive force spread out. Steel was melted, buildings were erased, and even the invisible air was burned to the point of boiling. The temperature had increased by dozens of times. "Oh, I underestimated you. I almost forgot, you are also a Quincy." The ground that Dustless and Ishida Ryukshin were standing on had been charred black, but Ishida Ryukshin had managed to escape the calamity. "It's you who underestimated me. I'm a pure-blooded Quincy, don't underestimate me." In the smoke, Ishida Ryuzu's arrogant voice could be heard. Following that, he was covered in all sorts of unruly patterns, and his skin had become as hard as a meteorite. Blood tranquilizer. Luckily, he's fine. Seeing this, Shinozaki Mikoto heaved a sigh of relief. The rock that was hanging in front of his chest had also landed safely. Staring at Ishida Ryuzu's face, Shinozaki Mikoto earnestly advised, "Little Long, you should leave this place first. There's no need for you to get involved in this mess. You are the only child of the Ishida family." Pfft. The smoke dispersed, revealing Ishida Ryuzu's face. Shinozaki Mikoto was dumbfounded, and could not help but laugh out loud. "This guy. I'm dying of laughter." Ishida Shiba also looked at Ishida Ryuzu's disfigured face, and laughed until he rolled on the ground. "You bastard, I'll tear you into pieces and burn your bones to ashes." Seeing this, Ishida Ryuzu was stunned. He then used Reisher to condense a mirror, and looked at his face. His entire body turned red. "Aw. There's no need to be so angry, right? At least I spared your life." Dustless shrugged helplessly. His eyes were filled with resentment, as if he was saying that Ishida Ryuzu should be thanking him. Looking closely, Ishida Ryuzu's handsome face was disfigured, and there was a huge footprint on it. It was like a branding iron, forever imprinted on Ishida Ryuzu's face. "You should be thanking me. If you walk on the streets like this, I guarantee that you'll turn heads 100%. Dustless teased. His tone was filled with schadenfreude. He hated people like Ishida Ryuzu the most. Others were kind enough to save you, but you didn't appreciate it and insisted on keeping up appearances. If that was the case, then you should live a pitiful life. You bastard, you must have done it on purpose." Ishida Ryuzu glared at him, and his lungs were about to explode. A huge footprint almost covered his entire face. How was he going to face others in the future? "You're right, I did it on purpose. But so what?" Dustless said uninterestedly, and yawned. With a sleepy expression, it was obvious that he did not put Ishida Ryuzu in his eyes. "Aren't you the father of the second male lead? I'm going to hit you. If you're not happy, come and bite me." Chapter 1060. Ishida Ryukshin's entire body trembled and his face turned ashen. Killing someone was just a matter of nodding his head to the ground. What Wuchen did was far worse than cutting him into 1,000 pieces. As a pure-blooded Quincy, Ishida Ryukshin thought highly of himself. Of course, it was undeniable that he had the capital to be superior. In this world, Quincy were very rare, and pure-blooded ones were even rarer. However, it was okay to be arrogant, but it depended on who the opponent was. To have a disdainful attitude towards someone who was stronger than you was courting death. If I just kill you, it would be too easy for you. I think it's more interesting to let you live in humiliation. Dustless ignored Ishida Ryukshin's eyes that wanted to peel his skin and break his bones. Boom boom boom. A violent hurricane swept from the distance, and the earth shook. Everyone felt like there was a mountain on their back, and they couldn't move an inch. Not only did he not die, he became stronger. What kind of monster did Sosuke Aizen create? Frowning, Dustless felt the surging waves of Ryatsu. He was very surprised, and he had a clearer understanding of Empyrean's strength. Then the sky turned dark red. A huge flash of light condensed above Empyrean's head, distorting space and time, like a whirlpool in the deep sea, swallowing the entire sky, and a red halo covered the sky. Gulp. Under this apocalyptic flash, everyone's expression changed greatly. Only Dustless could remain calm. Ishida Ishin and Ishida Ryukshin were seriously injured. They were already lucky that they didn't die from Dustless's sneak attack, and then they fought with Empyrean, and they were almost exhausted. As for Ishida Ryukshin, his handsome face was kicked by Dustless, and a domineering footprint was left on his face. I must take revenge. Ishida Ryukshin touched his face and said while gritting his teeth. Ao ao ao. At this time, a strange roar shook the sky, and it was even more terrifying than Empyrean. You, what are you doing? What are you doing? Get out of the way. Don't come near me. Suddenly, a panicked cry came. Dustless froze and subconsciously looked at Ishin. Shiba Ishin's mouth emitted a milky white spiritual pressure that covered his face like a mask. His spiritual pressure became different as he roared, which was similar to Subai's. This is voidification. This kid has been corroded by the power of the great illusionary realm. A glint of surprise flashed across Dustless's eyes as he exclaimed in shock. Only then did he remember that in the previous battle, Ishin Shiba was injured by Void, and 80% of Void's power had invaded his body. Damn it, how am I supposed to explain this to the head captain? Dustless had a headache. Before coming here, Old Man Yamamoto had told the two of them to take care of each other. Now that Ishin Shiba was inexplicably eroded by the power of the greater void, it was inevitable that he would be scolded. Get out of my way. Shinozaki Makino screamed in fear. Shiba Ishin was approaching her with saliva dripping from the corner of his mouth. You bastard, get away from Janine. Flying scythe kick. Ishida Ryukshin roared and channeled all the spiritual particles in his body towards Shiba Ishin. Shiba Ishin, who was completely consumed by the great illusionary realm, had an arrogant smile on his face as he opened his mouth and shot out a fiery red light. Boom boom boom. The destructive light easily blew away Ishida Ryukshin like a kite with a broken string. Bang bang bang. A few hundred meters away, Ishida Ryukshin was lying on the ground with his body charred. He was gasping for breath, and his heartbeat and breathing were very weak. It looked like he was about to stop. Monsters are gathering. Seeing this, Dustless sighed. Then, he turned into a photon and rushed towards Ishin at the speed of light. Get out of my way. Shinozaki Makino looked at Ishin in fear. Her soul was trembling as she was forced to a corner. Ishin was also approaching her with his teeth bared. Ishin was covered in milky white spiritual pressure. Under Shinozaki Makino's desperate gaze, he raised his sharp nails and stabbed towards her. If you're dematerialized. Even if you're my colleague, I can't let you go. I'm sorry, Captain Ishin. Shinozaki Makino's hopeless eyes were filled with hope. Dustless stood in front of her with a sinister smile, and a thick beam of light condensed on his fingers. Laser. The flash of light poured out and hit Ishin Shiba without any accident. Boom boom boom. The moment the light touched Ishin, it exploded. The scorching heat engulfed him, and the milky white spiritual pressure on his skin was melted. Hee hee. God is kind to me. Why should I save you? I can use this opportunity to kill you. You bastard, you're a traitor. You flirted with Urahara Kasuk and Sifing Quartz Yi. This is retribution. Dustless laughed. Since Ishin was already dematerialized, killing him would be an official matter. The head captain would not say anything. He could also use this opportunity to reap the rewards. Killing two birds with one stone. Pour all the dirty water on Ishin's head, make him the scapegoat, and kick him out of soul society. Roar roar roar, as if they had a tacit understanding, White Void also suddenly attacked from the side, opening his bloody mouth to bite at Yishiwin. The winner of this game has been decided. There's no need for you to exist. He turned his head and glanced at White Void. Suddenly, the space around him flashed with black light. It was tens of thousands of times sharper than a blade. Without exception, all of them were pointed at White Void. Dustless spat out a cold breath and ended White Void's life instantly. 90 Black Coffin of Hado. Pucci. 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 Countless rays of black light swarmed over, instantly crushing the body of Ethereal White. Chapter 1061. Number 90's Hado cut through the void. His entire body was covered with scars, and his body was on the verge of collapsing. He was bleeding profusely, and the blood vessels in his body could not be stopped. Ow ow ow, all beasts were ferocious, and the void was no exception. He was originally a greater void, and was naturally easily angered. Being severely injured by Dustless did not suppress his bloodthirst. Instead, he was completely enraged. Roar, the heart-wrenching roar of anger spread, deafening everyone. Their brains were not listening to their commands, and the only thing they could think of was the void's roar. After all, it was created. The nature of the beast did not change. Dustless was unfazed by the roar that was filled with endless killing intent and hatred. The difference between them was too great, and there was no comparison at all. They were not even of the same origin. In Dustless's eyes, it was just the unhappiness of a child who was beaten to tears. Caw caw caw. The surrounding void shattered like a mirror, and there was a series of cracking sounds. The sky was swallowed by the red demonic light, and the places that were affected by the light were filled with dead silence. What kind of monster is this guy? He knows Void Flash, and he seems to know the Ghost Dao ability of the Grim Reaper. Shinozaki Makoto swallowed his saliva and said in disbelief. He was so shocked that his entire body was trembling slightly. Dustless turned his head and glanced at Shinozaki Makoto. Disappointment flashed through his eyes, and he sighed to himself. What a pity. Her body was also infiltrated by the void's power. She will die soon. Dustless sighed to himself. A pure-blooded Quincy was extremely rare, and there were not many of them in the world. Most of them were Habaku's lackeys. You are also a tragedy. Dustless suddenly said after a while. What do you mean? Shinozaki Makoto's expression changed slightly. He could sense that Dustless was implying something else. Boom boom boom. At the same time, the void flash that Void White painstakingly created was completed. It turned into a void flash that was the size of a human's head, and the power it emitted was enough to destroy the world. What a terrifying void flash! Feeling the power of void flash, Shinozaki Mako said in fear. He instinctively shrunk his neck and stared at the giant void flash in the sky. Fear flashed in his beautiful eyes. In the end, she's still a woman. No, in the end, she's still just a student. Dustless calmly said as he stared at Shinozaki in her student uniform. It was normal for him to be afraid. After all, this was the first time he had met such an invincible great void realm expert, and he even had the ability to control the Grim Reaper. Dustless focused his gaze on the expanding void flash. A murderous grin appeared on his face. In order for you to disappear without a trace, show me some of your true abilities. As soon as Dustless finished his words, a strange black sphere appeared behind him. It was the size of a fist and looked harmless. It was impossible for it to kill the enemy, but Shinozaki's body instinctively moved back. Shinozaki Makino was shocked as he stared at the mysterious bead in a daze. Suddenly, he realized that his body was no longer listening to him and instinctively wanted to avoid it. Just disappear forever. Dustless glanced at Void Flash coldly. Under his command, the truth-seeking ball floating behind him flew out. Roar! White Void also clearly sensed the black sphere, but he quickly gave it a look of disdain, even treating it as air. He did not feel any spiritual pressure fluctuations. It did not seem to have any destructive power, so he continued to focus on transferring spiritual pressure to Void Flash. Is it really going to work? Shinozaki Makino's face was filled with doubt. Under Void Flash's indifferent gaze, the truth-seeking ball came into contact with his body. Crack, 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 crack. Void Flash was as hard as a meteorite. Even number 90 Tao Breaker, Black Coffin, could not shatter it. His entire body started to collapse. The process was extremely strange. There were no wounds on his body, but he just disappeared mysteriously. His legs, abdomen, arms, head, all of them collapsed one by one. Roar! Void Flash roared unwillingly. His mouth full of sharp teeth spat out cold air as he stared at Dustless. Madness flashed in his eyes. Void Flash condensed on the horns on his forehead was thrown out with all of his strength. Even in death, you want to drag me down with you. This is very similar to Aizen's style. Staring at the incoming flash, Dustless was as calm as a breeze. The truth-seeking ball appeared behind him again. It was not proportional to the huge flash of light, but Kurosaki's face was full of relief. With the previous lesson, her heart also relaxed. As expected, the moment Void Flash came into contact with the truth-seeking ball, it collapsed on its own. The haze that shrouded the world also disappeared, and everything returned to normal. It's finally over. Seeing this, Shinozaki Makino breathed a sigh of relief. She immediately tried to stand up, but a black shadow covered her. Miss Shinozaki, you are also injured. Soon, you will be eroded by the power of the greater void and die. Dustless walked over and said lazily. Shiba Ishin was lying on the ground far away. The mask on her body was gradually collapsing. It was obvious that she was fighting against the power of the void in her body. I know. The power of the void is a fatal poison to the Quincy. Shinozaki Makino's beautiful eyes were dim. Her beautiful face was filled with loneliness as she said helplessly. I told you. No living creature wants to die. Dustless's lips curled into a faint smile. He continued, Miss Shinozaki, I can guarantee that you will be safe. Even if the power of the void destroys the dormitory, it will be fine. But, we have to make a deal. Only then can I help you out of this crisis. Shinozaki Makino frowned. She looked at Dustless's eyes. After hesitating for a while, she said, "Let's hear it." Chapter 1062. Shinozaki was curious about Dustless's true thoughts. She couldn't understand how a dying person like her could be of any use to Dustless. She might not even be of any use to him. Dustless closed his eyes and seemed to be thinking about something. His brows were tightly knitted. "Am I of any value to you?" Shinozaki asked curiously as she stared at Dustless's thoughtful face. She was just a dying person. She didn't think that she was of any value to be used or valued. Of course. Dustless grinned and revealed a mysterious smile. Even the most insignificant chess piece can explode with the most destructive power if used properly. Not to mention, you're very important. Shinozaki's face was blank. She didn't think that she was of much use. She was just a dying person. "Do you know who your ancestor is?" Dustless suddenly changed the topic and asked. "Ancestor?" Shinozaki made a distressed expression and bitterly smiled. "I really don't know who the ancestor of the Shinozaki family is." Dustless shook his head and said directly, "I'm talking about Yawatch." Shinozaki thought for a long time before answering. "Yawatch? I think there was such a person. I heard that he was the ancestor of all Quincy, but I heard that he died many years ago. It's good that you know Yawatch." Dustless wiped the sweat off his temples. He was afraid that Shinozaki was an ignorant person and had to start from the beginning. And then, "Don't tell me that Yawatch came back from the dead." Shinozaki blinked her gem-like eyes and said playfully. "Why do you think he's dead?" Dustless glanced at Yawatch with a deep gaze and asked instead of answering. "You have to understand that Yawatch is the god of all Quincy. Even if he's immortal, God. He's not worthy. He's just a butcher." Dustless was planning to brag about Yuhabok and then scold him. Who would have thought that Shinozaki Manori would rudely interrupt him? Could it be, thinking of a possibility, Dustless asked tentatively, "Was your ancestor killed by Yawatch?" Although it was just Dustless's guess, it was highly likely because the hometowns of Busby and Jugram were both conquered by Yawatch and eliminated by Yawatch. And such examples could be found everywhere. "Well, I'm not too sure about the specifics. All I know is that Yawatch isn't a good person. The elders in my family once said that Quincy's decline was caused by Yawatch. It was all to satisfy his selfish desires," Shinozaki Makoto explained. His tone was filled with hatred. "Idiot, that's because your Abyss annihilation was too stupid. You drank Yawatch's blood and deserve to be killed. You will all become nourishment for the saints in the future." Dustless complained in his mind. Those who wanted to quickly increase their strength would accept the gift of Yawatch, which was his own blood. Therefore, during the parting, it would be the nourishment for Yawatch to become stronger. In addition, the souls of those with impure blood would also belong to Yawatch after death. "We've been talking for a long time. What do you want from me?" Shinozaki Makoto reminded Dustless when he saw that Dustless was getting further and further away from the topic. Seeing that Shinozaki Makoto was angered by Yawatch, Dustless said, "I'm sorry to tell you that Yawatch is not dead. It's just sealed. Other than that, the impure blood of Quincy is the nourishment for Yawatch's resurrection. You weren't one of them in the past. Now, your blood has been integrated with the power of the void, and your blood is no longer pure. This means that you are also one of the nourishments for Yawatch's resurrection." The biggest reason why Shinozaki Makoto would fall in the future was because of Yawatch. "Impossible. How do you know all this?" Shinozaki Makoto denied it immediately. "Besides, I've never drunk Yawatch's blood. How can I be its nourishment?" Dustless glanced at the flustered Shinozaki Makoto and said coldly, "You haven't drunk Yawatch's blood, but what about your ancestor? Don't forget that Yawatch is the ancestor of all Quincy. Shinozaki Mikoto was speechless. He wanted to refute, but he couldn't find a reason. What do you want? After a while, Shinozaki Mikoto fixed his gaze on Dustless and said, if what you said is true, it's useless even if you save me. My blood is no longer pure. In the future, Yawatch will still take away my power. Your death is a foregone conclusion. There are some things that I can't change. Dustless looked at Shinozaki Mikoto with a complicated expression. Although he was powerful, he wasn't omnipotent. He caught the unwillingness in Shinozaki Mikoto's eyes and said, are you willing to be killed by Yawatch? In fact, I can help you take revenge. Shinozaki Mikoto was very doubtful. Really? Yawatch used to be the king of Quincy. Its strength must be shocking. Of course. Dustless smiled strangely and moved closer to Shinozaki Mikoto. He said darkly, the so-called saint is actually just extracting your soul. I can implant something special in your soul in advance. I'll make that bastard Yawatch suffer so much that he'll wish he was dead. It'll be revenge for you. What do you think, Miss Shinozaki? Shinozaki Mikoto was silent. Hesitation was evident in his eyes. Dustless wasn't surprised to see Shinozaki Mikoto hesitate. He said, the great void in your body will soon devour your entire body. You'll die in a few hours. However, I can use my ability to help you suppress the great void and let you live for a few more years. In return, you have to let me implant a spell in your soul to give that bastard Yawatch a surprise. He felt that if Yawatch was a jackal, the young man in front of him was a ferocious tiger. Captain, what do you think about the modern world? After a while, Dustless suddenly closed his eyes and asked. Hearing this, Ishin was stunned. He subconsciously looked around and said, although it's not as exquisite as Soul Society, it still has its own unique flavor. My first impression of it is pretty good. Wuchen shook his head. The light on his right arm floated and condensed into a golden sword. He said coldly, Captain Shiba, you misunderstood me. I mean, what will happen if the modern world becomes a graveyard? Graveyard? Hearing this, Ishin was puzzled. He looked at Dustless and saw that his face was dark and murderous. In a trance, Ishin saw an unprecedented beast. It opened its bloody mouth and bared its fangs at him. Captain Dustless, what do you mean? Ishin, who felt that something was wrong, was secretly on guard. Looking at Dustless, who was emitting murderous aura, his right hand was already holding the hilt of his zanpakuto. No wonder you were plotted against by Aizen Sosuke, your brain is really slow. Captain, I said this. I mean to destroy you, because you heard something you shouldn't have heard. Dustless said casually. Ishin's expression changed, and he immediately took the fiercest reaction. Bakuto number 61, Rokuto Light Prison. 6 huge golden light ribbons attacked from all directions, subduing the sloppy Dustless in an instant. Not only Wuchen, but Shinozaki Mako who was beside him also received the same treatment. He was restrained by 6 huge light ribbons and was unable to move. Capture you and send you to Soul Society for the head captain to deal with. Ishin said sternly. However, as soon as his voice fell, a burst of fragmented sound made Ishin's expression stiff, completely replaced by astonishment. Wu Che just raised his foot and moved slightly, and the bakuto that bound him instantly disappeared. He calmly looked at Ishin. Bakuto number 61, Rokuto Light Prison. At the same time, 6 huge rays of light came from all directions, instantly blocking Ishin's escape route and binding him to the heavy armor. Kakaka, seeing this, Ishin's body swayed left and right, and after a while, he couldn't help but blush. He tried to destroy it in the same way as Dustless, but it was futile. The effect was negligible. Pucci. In desperation, Ishin could only use his sword to destroy the Rokudo light prison and break free from it. He looked around and hurriedly looked for Dushless, but he was surprised to find that Dushless was nowhere to be seen, and his Ryatsu was completely gone. Puchi! A cold light came from behind and penetrated Ishin's body. He suddenly turned around and saw Dushless. Of course, there was also the golden sword in his hand, which almost instantly injured Ishin, and the golden sword pierced his heart. The gap between you and me is like the gap between Vasto Lord and Gilliam. Chapter 1064. Ishin looked at the golden sword in disbelief. Because of the high temperature, he felt an unprecedented stinging pain. His face suddenly became pale and extremely haggard. How is this possible? Did he come from the sky? Ishin was shocked. He couldn't figure out where Dustless came from. He looked around but couldn't find any trace. As expected of the captain, you are really talented. But unfortunately, you are my enemy, and you heard something you shouldn't have heard. Don't think that you will be safe, you will have to pay the price. Dustless chuckled. He jumped out using the heavenly hand, so Ishin couldn't understand it. Whoosh! A cold light swept across, piercing Dustless's eyes. He looked up and saw Ishin waving his Zanpakuto at Dustless in a very tricky way. Funny, seeing this, Dustless didn't dodge. He raised his thin right arm and grabbed it. It seemed that he wanted to catch Ishin's attack with his bare hands. You are courting death. Seeing how arrogant Wuchen was, Ishin's murderous aura surged. His black pupils were filled with murderous aura, and his strength was several times stronger than before. Your hatred for me is quite deep. Dustless smiled. His right arm was still grabbing the Zanpakuto. Clang! A roar of steel resounded, and the head was not separated from the body as expected. The whole hand turned into 5 black fingers and easily caught the incoming Zanpakuto. You caught my Zanpakuto with your bare hands. Ishin exclaimed in disbelief while enduring the pain all over his body. It was as if he was in a dream. Everything that happened in front of him was illusory. As I said before, the gap between you and me is the gap between Vasto Lord and Killian. It was just a boring one-sided crush. Do you think you can be on par with me? Don't joke around. We're not 2 or 3 years old kids. Don't have such unrealistic thoughts in the future. The chakra in his body surged, and his eyes rapidly twisted. Ripples gushed out from his purple eyes, easily forcing Ishin to retreat. Shinra Tensei. The repulsive force easily sent Shiba Ishin flying, forcing him to retreat again and again, cutting a sorry figure. So. Dustless took a step forward and appeared next to Ishin Shiba in an instant. He chased after him and attacked him. The Kusanagi sword in his hand shone brightly. Clang, clang, clang. The sparks from the clash of swords and sabers were particularly dazzling, and the frequency was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, the two had clashed dozens of times, but the situation was almost one-sided. Ishin was forced back by Dustless, and the wounds on his body were getting more and more, and he was bleeding non-stop. Puchi! Dustless aimed his Kusanagi sword at Shiba Ishin's right shoulder. Shiba Ishin's right arm was cut open, and his right arm that was holding the Zanpakuto trembled. His Zanpakuto almost fell to the ground. Light speed kick. Taking advantage of this, a straight flash of light whizzed out. The momentum was fierce, and it was like a golden spear that was unstoppable. Ishin wanted to dodge, but at this moment, he was already covered in wounds. Although they weren't fatal, the number of wounds greatly limited his speed. He was inevitably hit by the flash of light. Boom, boom, boom. The earth trembled, and Ishin, who was covered in black smoke, was sent flying. His body was severely burned, and his face was unrecognizable. Is this the end? Glancing at Ishin, Dustless said uninterestedly. When he was about to finish him off with his zanpakuto, Isshin stood up again. Shinozaki Ichigo in the future must be inherited. Seeing this scene, Dustless was interested again. He was about to test how long Isshin could last, but his body strangely emitted a black mist. The spiritual pressure disappeared. What's going on? Dustless was surprised, and he suddenly realized that he couldn't feel Isshin's spiritual pressure. It was as if it suddenly disappeared into thin air, and he couldn't detect it at all. No wonder he woke up and was willing to come back to the shore. Dustless guessed and immediately shook his head. Isshin was a stubborn person, and it was impossible for him to give up, so there was only one possibility. He had evolved to a higher dimension than Dustless. Could it be Moonless? Although it was just Wu Chen's personal guess, he said with certainty. That's right. So far, there were only two people who had truly released Moonless. One was Shinozaki Ichigo, and the other was his father, Isshin. Get out of the way, something is wrong with this guy. She was counting on Dustless to save her life. If Dustless died first, she would die with him. And Isshin Shiba in front of him was obviously not right. There was a mysterious black mist floating around his body, and so was his zanpakuto. Especially his deep eyes, they were dead silent, as if they could see through people's hearts, full of oppression. This is my strongest move. Isshin said with a hoarse voice, after using this move, I will completely lose the power of the Shinigami, and it is also my last move to end you. Hearing this, Dustless looked at Isshin sadly and said lazily, it is indeed a very strong move, but it can only end you, it can't end me. It's also impossible, you're just asking for it, Captain. Dustless looked at Isshin calmly. It's just Moonless, there's no need to worry. With a gentle flick of his thumb, the Guile sword spun at high speed as if it was turning its head. A dark red hurricane of destruction swept out. The red hurricane descended upon the world. From an insignificant small tornado, it instantly expanded thousands of times. If not for Dustless deliberately suppressing it, Kangzucho would have collapsed in the blink of an eye. The red hurricane was extremely terrifying. The moment it appeared, it tore apart the void. The originally clear day dimmed, and it was as if they had arrived at the depths of the dark and cold universe. Isshin Shiba's moonless sword, which he had used all his strength to cast, was destroyed by the hurricane. The destroyed void was extremely horrifying. The ghastly cracks were enough to send chills down one's spine. Every time it was repaired, it would be shattered by the remnant energy of the good separation sword. The cycle continued until the remnant energy of the good separation sword was completely destroyed. Dustless looked at Isshin Shiba, but he was surprised to find that the kid had disappeared. Oh, F***ck. I was careless. Dustless suddenly slapped his head and cursed, that kid is really smart. He's as cunning as a rabbit. Kurosaki did not know whether to laugh or cry. He looked deeply at Dustless and said bluntly, you can't even lie to a 3-year-old child. You must have let him go on purpose. You're helping your enemy. Dustless did not deny it. He admitted, so what if I help my enemy? If he really has the ability to kill me in the future, I will thank God. Dustless touched the Hogyoku on his chest and looked helpless. If it was in the past, he would definitely kill the dangerous enemy in advance. However, the evolution of the Hogyoku was too strange. Dustless had to be afraid of death in order to evolve to a higher realm. What kind of person could make Dustless feel afraid? Of course, it was someone stronger than him. It would be best if Isshin Shiba could surpass Dustless's level in the future. Let's go. It's time to experiment on you. The sky was dark. In a foreign world, there was no end to it. It was dead and there was no one around. At this moment, the void distorted and a large whirlpool appeared. 2 figures stepped out of it. This is my God's might, space. It's in another dimension, so no one will disturb us. Don't worry. Wuchen explained when he saw Shinozaki Manori looking around suspiciously. Alright, take off your clothes. Wuchen glanced at Shinozaki Manori and said indifferently. Take off my clothes. Kurosaki's expression froze. She hesitated and was obviously embarrassed. Kurosaki looked at Dustless from the corner of her eyes. She saw that his eyes were as clear as water. There was not a trace of lust in them. Kurosaki gritted her teeth and nodded. However, Dustless's next sentence made her suspicious. Hurry up and take it off. I promise I won't peek at you. Wuchen said impatiently as he felt helpless towards Shinozaki's hesitation. Kurosaki's face was full of doubts. Just as she was about to ask, the strange spiritual pressure in her body went berserk. Her expression changed and she undressed without hesitation. With Dustless's help, Shinozaki Jindo was safe and sound in the end, and he successfully implanted the transcription seal in Shinozaki Jindo's body. With Dustless's current strength, he could place the transcription seal into anyone's body at will, but its power would be greatly reduced. Therefore, he placed it into the soul and spiritual pressure that he had implanted in Shinozaki Meiko. Once Yawatch used the saint ability to forcibly extract Shinozaki Jindo's power, it meant that Dustless's power would be devoured by Yawatch. The Amaterasu, sealed in the transcription seal, would burn. Amaterasu was the most effective against a person's soul. Time passed, and 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Shinozaki Jindo left safely, and Dustless naturally returned to Soul Society. Soul Society held the same captain's meeting as usual. Is this true? Inside a team house, Yamamoto frowned as he listened to Dustless's report. Yes, head captain. Dustless's expression was serious as he answered. The situation had been exaggerated by him, and the gist of it was that Shiba Ishin was severely injured and was unfortunately killed by Void White. As for Wu Chen, he went through untold hardships to kill White Void and take revenge for Shiba Ishin. Allah! Captain Dustless's captain on a mission is always in trouble. Ikemara Jin chuckled, and his tone was obviously criticizing. That's why, Captain Ikemara Jin, don't ever meet me. Otherwise, the next unlucky one may be you. Dustless naturally didn't want to be outdone and immediately retorted. It's considered a perfect mission, but it's a pity that we lost Captain Shiba. Head Captain Yamamoto was so upset that he wanted to vomit blood. In Soul Society, there were always captains who were killed or died from other unnatural causes. Not bringing back that void is a serious crime. Mayuri said unhappily. His 12th Division put in a lot of effort to capture Void White, but in the end, they didn't even get a single strand of hair. Losing the wife and losing the soldiers. The collection of souls is almost done, and the other Hogyoku is almost complete. It won't be long before we start. Aizen sneered as he glanced at Dustless. Aizen Sosuke had an unforgettable hatred for Dustless. Ever since Dustless appeared, Aizen Sosuke felt like there was a giant wall in front of him, making him extremely difficult to deal with. Once there was a suitable opportunity, Aizen would never let Dustless go. When the new Hogyoku is completed, it's time for you to die. Aizen closed his eyes and began to think of a plan to use Kyoka Suijetsu to deal with Dustless through Central 46 to deal with Dustless. He knew that Urahara Kasuke's half Hogyoku was still in Dustless's hands, and it was impossible for him to hand it over. He could only order the entire Soul Society to deal with Dustless. Chapter 1067. After another hour, the captain's meeting finally came to an end. Every time they talked about something trivial, but old man Yamamoto was very happy about it. Every time they had a meeting, except for his sickly disciple, Jushari Yucatake, everyone else had to be present. No one was allowed to escape. Long time no see, Chinkuan. After the captain's meeting, all the captains left one after another. Uno Hanaretsu came up to greet him with a smile, but soon after, her face wrinkled with dissatisfaction as she said unhappily, Chinkuan seems to have been avoiding me recently. Hearing this, Dustless bitterly smiled and decisively said, Retsu, that's just your imagination. Recently, I've been busy with work. You know that I rarely have time to rest. Almost every day, I have a lot of work to do. I haven't had the chance to relax recently. Dustless quickened his pace, wanting to escape. He was indeed purposely avoiding Uno Hanaretsu. This woman's nose was just too sensitive, and the word smart was not enough to describe her. Chinkuan, Uno Hanaretsu dragged out her words with a complicated expression. This, looking at Uno Hanaretsu's sorrowful face, Dustless was speechless. He suddenly realized that he was a bit cruel. When he first came to Soul Society, it was always Uno Hanaretsu who helped him. Now, he was avoiding Uno Hanaretsu for no reason, just because she was too smart. It was indeed a bit unreasonable. Retsu, you're thinking too much. I suffered quite a bit of injuries when dealing with a great void in the modern world. I was just about to go to the 4th Division to ask for your help. Dustless changed his tone and said with a smile. Uno Hanaretsu nodded and led the way. Is that void very strange? It can actually injure you. Uno Hanaretsu asked in surprise. She knew Dustless's strength very well. Looking at the distant horizon, Dustless did not think much of it. Of course, he was just making things up to fool Uno Hanaretsu. Although void was very strong, it was impossible for it to injure him. He immediately replied, yes, he is very strong. He even knows the death god's ghost Tao. He is worlds apart from the great void realm that I know of. It took me a lot of effort to get rid of him. Uno Hualai did not doubt Dustless's words at all. That day, the 12th Division had indeed detected a large amount of spiritual pressure in the modern world. Looking at Uno Hualai's face, Dustless suddenly felt sorry for her. He had only made up a story, but Uno Hualai had actually believed it without a doubt. Dustless was touched, but at the same time, he felt guilty. Lie. Dustless turned to look at Uno Hualai's gentle face and said seriously, if I betray Soul Society one day, which side will you choose to side with? Uno Hualai was stunned upon hearing this. She stared at Dustless's face and felt troubled. This choice is truly vexing. After a while, Uno Hua sighed helplessly. She had been loyal to Soul Society for 1,000 years, so Uno Hualai could not easily abandon her beliefs. On the other hand, Dustless could barely be considered a close friend, so she could not easily give up her beliefs. There's no need to feel troubled, Lai. Seeing this, Dustless was somewhat disappointed. This was within his expectations. After all, he had only known Uno Hualai for a little more than a year. 1,000 years versus a short 1 year, it was clear which was more important. If you betray Soul Society, I will definitely side with you and destroy Soul Society. After a while, Dustless suddenly said. His eyes were filled with determination, and his clear eyes were as firm as a boulder. In Dustless's heart, Soul Society and Uno Hualai's feelings were not proportional. If he had to choose between the two, he would definitely side with Uno Hualai without hesitation. Uno Hualai's heart that had been sealed for 1,000 years loosened, and a warm current flowed through her heart. After 1,000 years, she, who had observed people to the smallest detail, could naturally tell that Dustless's words were from the bottom of his heart. His sincerity was without any pretense. No matter how young you are, you're still an adult. If the head captain hears this, he'll make a big fuss. Uno Hualai did not know whether to laugh or cry, but she was very touched. Oh right, Chenjun, the 4th Division has a lot of injured people from a few days ago. They're still waiting for me to take care of them. I'll take my leave first. Dustless nodded and said, do as you wish. As expected, she still can't let go of Soul Society. Looking at Uno Hua Lai's disappearing figure with a complicated expression, Dustless felt a sense of loss. At the same time, he laughed at himself. According to his previous temperament, he would not hesitate to ruthlessly destroy such an untactful woman. However, for some reason, he did not have such extreme emotions when facing Uno Hua Lai. He only wanted to respect her choice and did not have any other thoughts. The sky gradually darkened. At night, the sky was filled with stars. The moonlight was like a plate, and the starlight that filled the sky was extremely beautiful. Captain, I have something to do, I need to take leave. Matsumoto Ranju had an "I'm very busy" expression, as if something big had really happened. However, Dustless ignored her. Her so-called matter was actually going to drink. Forget it, go. Remember to come back quickly. Waving his hand, Dustless gestured for Matsumoto Ranju to scram. Since he had nothing to do recently, let her do as she pleased. Dustless did not restrict the movements of these team members. Matsumoto Ranjaku suddenly smiled and disappeared in front of Dustless like a storm. This is unfinished work. Looking at the documents on the table in front of him, Dustless muttered to himself. Out of boredom, he picked up the documents and carefully read them. After a while, his expression became incomparably serious. Strange, this can't be an accident. There must be a problem. Dustless said sternly after reading a few times and confirming that his eyes were not blurred. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.